So I hope you all have had a really nice day, and there's still a lot of energy in the room, so I can see that you haven't faded yet, so that's excellent. And so thank you all for all of your great engagement today, and it's really been a great day, and great to hear all of your conversations as well. So I hope you feel the same way. So before I introduce our plenary speaker, I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. So firstly, the Pulse Fellows would really like to thank Cynthia Bowerly from HHMI and Chuck Sullivan from NSF. And these have been our sponsors for really making this happen. So we're very grateful for that. So thank you for that. But thank you also for your time that you've taken to come spend this time with us. And so we really appreciate that, and we appreciate you being a resource as well. So thank you so much. And then just a few logistics. So today you have dinner on your own, and so there are several places that you can have dinner. One is the dining service, but they stop serving at 7 p.m. So as long as you get there by a little bit before 7, they'll be still serving food, and then you can stay longer than that. But they stop serving dinner at 7, so just keep that in mind. But there are also other places around town that you can have dinner. And we encourage you to, yes?
I'm just going to interject. So it's sort of a strange location on the website, which is a long web address if you don't have a link to it already, but serp.biologyandtheliberarts.org is the website for the Institute. And the link to all the restaurant suggestions is under the travel link. All right, so if you haven't found that, April gave us a great list of her favorite restaurants in Carytown if you want to go into that area. So.
And we'd like you, I know you're probably really exhausted by now, but hopefully we encourage you to spend some time thinking about your action plan tonight, if you still have some energy. Okay, so and then tomorrow we start at 8 a.m., not 7:30, so you have half an hour to sleep in. But it'll be the same logistics as this morning. You come in and there'll be numbered tables, and just check your sheet for where you need to be. Okay, so it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Erin Dolan, who's our plenary speaker for this evening. And Erin brings a variety of experience and expertise and has been recognized on the national scale for her work. So we're really pleased to have you here, Erin. She earned her BA in biology at Wellesley College and a PhD in neuroscience at the University of California at San Francisco. Erin is currently the founding executive director of the Texas Center for Science Discovery in the College of Natural Sciences at the University of Texas, Austin. She recently moved to UT Austin from the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology at the University of Georgia, where she also held a position of senior scholar in biology education. And she's also previously been at Virginia Tech as well. Erin is also the editor-in-chief of CBE Life Sciences Education, which is a premier journal of biology education research and evidence-based teaching, and an important resource for many of the goals we're trying to accomplish here. And Erin has been a much sought-after resource for a number of national education initiatives and has worked really closely with several professional societies, including the American Society of Plant Biologists, American Society of Microbiology, National Academies of Sciences, and she recently received the Excellence in Education Award last year from the American Society of Plant Biologists. All right, no, I'll stop. I just wanted to say that I've really personally also benefited tremendously from getting to know Erin, and so I'm really excited that you have this opportunity, and she's always extremely generous with her time and fun to look at. So, without further ado, thank you.
Should I use the handheld? Is that better? It's better. Yeah.
This is fine. I'm happy to use a handheld. Is that good? Yeah. That's good, mine? Okay. All right, first of all, I would like to thank my hosts for such a great invitation. I was really excited to be here. As Nitya has said, I just moved from the University of Georgia to UT Austin a month ago, and I don't know what I was thinking, that I could be here a month after a move, but I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk with you and to provide sort of my version of a 20,000-foot view of undergraduate science education. A lot of talks focus on sort of what we need to do to change, like at a really big level, and what all the calls for action are, and I'll touch on that briefly. But what I'm hoping to do with this 20,000-foot view is, instead of focusing on the abundance of evidence of why we should change, or all the challenges to change, I'm hoping to summarize what we know by thinking about lots and lots and lots of papers at the same time, and make that directly applicable to what you do in the classroom. So that's my goal, basically synthesize across whole body knowledge, and then talk about what that means for what you can do in the classroom tomorrow if it weren't summer. That was a joke. All right, so let's start with a little bit about what we know. And does anyone know Guido Sarducci? Yeah! Do you remember the 5-Minute University? Does everyone remember the 5-Minute University? Or some people not know what I'm talking about? Okay, excellent! Okay, let's hit the plays. Okay, this is what we know. Sorry, we have to watch the advertisement.
I find that education, I think it don't matter where you go to school, Italy, America, Brazil, it's all the same. It's all just memorization. And it don't matter how long you can remember anything, just so you can parrot it back for the tests. And I got this idea for a school I would like to start. Something called the 5-Minute University. And the idea is that in 5 minutes, you learn what the average college graduate remembers 5 years after he or she's out of school. With the cost of like $20. That might seem like a lot of money, $20 just for 5 minutes. But that's for like a tuition, capping and gown rental, graduation picture, snacks, everything included. You know, like in college, you have to take a foreign language. Well, at the 5-Minute University, you can have your choice. Any language you want, you can take it. Say if you want to take Spanish, what I teach you is, ¿Cómo está usted? That means, how are you? And the answer is, muy bien, means very well. And believe me, if you took 2 years of college Spanish, 5 years after out of school, ¿Cómo está usted? Muy bien, about all you're going to remember. So in my school, that's all they learn. You see, you don't have to waste your time with the conjugations, vocabulary, all that junk. You just forget it anyway, now what's the difference? Economics, supply and demand. That's it. Business is you buy something and you sell it for more. Theology, I'm going to have a theology department, you know, since I'm a priest, it's all right. And what you have to learn in theology is the answer to the question, where is God? And the answer is, God is everywhere. Why? Because he likes you. That's kind of a combination of the Disney and Roman Catholic philosophies. It's just perfect for the late 70s, early 80s, you know? Just perfect. Well, after the courses are all over, then it's a time for a little Easter vacation. No time to go to Fort Lauderdale, only lasts like 20 seconds. But what I do for you, I like to turn on the sun lamp, and I'll give you a little glass of orange juice. That's in the snack department, orange juice. And then after vacation, you know, after you swallow it real quick, then it's a time for the final exams. I say to you, ¿Cómo está usted? You say, muy bien. where there's a God, the God is everywhere, economics, supply and demand. Then I put on your cap and a gown. I get out to my Polaroid camera, I make a little snap and flash a picture for you. I give you the picture, you give me $20, I give you a diploma, and you're a college graduate, ready to go.
Okay. What's the problem? He's right. He's right. Right? The perception is that going to school is about memorization. Okay? And some of you in this room have been working really hard to change that. And others of you are here because you want to change that. And I'm going to hopefully give you some tools today that will help you make that change. To move away from only being able to remember supply and demand 5 years from now. So just in case you aren't familiar, there have been lots of calls for this change over several decades from all the big organizations, several of which are represented in this room. And these publications really nicely summarize the wealth of research and evidence to drive that change. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about each individual study or all the meta-analyses, but I want to draw attention to key points that each of these documents and the representative organizations are saying. First, we need to teach in ways that are consistent with how people learn, so that students learn to think and act more like experts. So it's not accumulation of a bunch of factual knowledge, it's moving students in their expertise. We need to recruit and prepare a larger, more diverse STEM workforce. And we need to prepare students to solve problems, learn on their own, and work independently and collaboratively. So that's what we're aiming for, not what you can remember 5 years from now based on a bunch of memorization. Okay? So that's where we're aiming. How do we get there? I would argue there are 8 things that we know, based on, again, on a wealth of literature, that you can do right now to improve student learning. And I'm going to walk through each of these and why they make sense, and how you might go about doing them. First, design the course backward. How many people have heard of backwards design? Awesome. Has it come to the meeting already? Okay, we got a good number of people already thinking about that. Great. Second, aim high. And I'll get to what that means, but basically move beyond the facts. Move beyond the facts. Third, give students messy problems. And I'll explain what I mean by messy problems and their value as we go through this talk. Fourth, expect students to talk and write. Give them opportunities to do that and expect them to do it. Have students work in groups. Provide students with opportunities for practice. Build in mechanisms for feedback. And be a mentor rather than an information deliverer. Okay, so looking at across the body of knowledge, these are 8 things that you can do very concretely that will help your students learn. Did I count right? I see you count. We're good. Okay, good. Okay, so design backward. It looks like a number of people. How many people have actually done backwards design? There's a lot of folks. Okay, so how many people have not heard of backwards design until I just said it? Only a couple of people. Okay, so we'll just walk through the highlights. Okay, so the idea with backwards design is instead of, think back to the first time you started teaching a class. It was probably a little painful. What did you do? What did you do to figure out how to teach the class?
Open the textbook.
Open the textbook. And then what did you do?
Chapter 1.
Yes, chapter 1, and then you march through in order. Okay, so.
But I didn't get all the way through it.
Oh, no, all 35 chapters in the biology textbook. Yeah, massive information dump of biology text. So what this process argues is that instead of starting with your content, you start with your goals. What do you want students to be able to do? And then you move from those sort of broad goals, like what are some goals that you have for your students as science learners? Critical thinking. What else? Just critical thinking? Actually, that may not, truly, that may not.
Oral and written communication.
Okay, ability to communicate. What else? Hey, what is this? Hey, run it on. Excellent. Be able to read and analyze scientific articles. Apply their knowledge to real world situations. Lovely. So you start with these broad content and skill goals, and then you work your way specifically to what students should be able to do. So critical thinking, that's kind of broad and vague and way out there. What can a student do if they can think critically?
Analyze data.
Analyze data.
Interpret it.
Interpret data. Deconstruct complex ideas. So this is more the sort of grain size that you can actually teach in a class. And this is more what we're aiming for either at the end of a curriculum or at the end of a full class or at the end of an entire scientific training trajectory. And then you design your assessment. So you've got what you know students should be able to do. Now we're going to give them a way to show it. Okay? So you mentioned read and analyze a paper, right? How do you know if a student can read a paper? Yeah, we can discuss it. So maybe you keep track of somehow how they discuss. How else would you know a student can read a paper? They can explain it to another student. What's another way? Written critique, and that I would say is even a step beyond, right? So that's not just being able to read it, that's being able to evaluate it. So be able to write a critique of the paper. Great, so you've already got some ideas about how you're going to do that assessment. And then you actually have to give them some practice doing it. What are you going to have them do so that they can be successful on the assessment? So maybe you give them a figure in class. Maybe you give them a homework assignment, and they have to come in and discuss what they did on that homework assignment with classmates. And then finally, you actually evaluate it, and not necessarily just the students, but maybe your own self. Like, I designed that activity to achieve this thing, and the students are sort of missing the boat systematically. Maybe it's something I did. Maybe I need to change the assignment somehow. So I take that evidence from evaluation, and I go back and either change my assessment or change what I did instructionally, so that I can then improve, ultimately, student learning. So I'm taking the evidence that I collect through assessment and use it to improve what I do as an instructor and hopefully improve what students do as learners. So you can do this right now. So some tips. This is hard, so copy someone else who's done it. It's not a bad thing. Try with one goal or one lesson or one unit at a time. I'm at the point where I can't sort of not do it. And so when I design a course, I design it with backwards design in mind. But it's okay if you just take one thing and design it this way instead of trying to reinvent your old course, because then you just want to lay down on the floor and do nothing. Okay. Put your goal, your objective, your activity, and your assessment next to each other. Check. Do they actually align? Or wait a minute, am I assessing factual knowledge when really I was aiming for this other thing? Or am I attempting to assess critical thinking when all I did was basically deliver information? So check for alignment. Okay. Questions about backward design? All right, then let's go on to number 2. I love this.
Isn't that fun?
I know. That's what you get 3 on. See, it looks like a little formative assessment right now. Okay, number 2. Aim high. Beyond the facts. Okay, that's what I mean by aiming high. We're aiming beyond the facts. I'll give you an example of why that's important. Can you read this? People know about Traxlane? Okay, so it's very important to learn about Traxlane, you know? Traxlane is a new form of diameter. It's motiled in Seristana. And the Seristanians found that they could crystallate large amounts of Furban and then bracter it to cause the Traxlane. This new and more efficient bractylation process has the potential to make Traxlane one of the most useful products within the molecular family of Lucas eats Snezlas. Okay, did you get it? Are you ready? What is Truxley? It's a new form of planter. Absolutely. Where's it, Montel? Sarasota. How is Truxley in Quazo? And why is it important? Which one? Okay, so what's the problem here? What's the problem here? Yes. You can respond to every single question with knowing nothing, absolutely nothing. Okay? So what is the problem with facts? What are the limitations of facts? Students can memorize facts and answer your factual questions without having any understanding of the importance of those facts, connections between those facts. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we want to aim high beyond the facts because of the limitations of facts. I want to be clear on this. Facts are important. I think that a lot of folks say, oh gosh, you're telling me not to focus on the facts and you think the facts are important. That's not true. That's not true at all. The facts are important. You need the facts to be able to put the pieces together. But you don't need every single fact in a 36-chapter biology textbook to be able to understand some biology. So pick the essential ones. Don't stop with the facts. Don't stop with just the facts. Go beyond the facts and have students make use of the facts in their learning. And show how they connect. One of the biggest differences between novices in a discipline and experts is how they connect facts, how facts are organized in their thinking. So if you can show how experts connect facts to students, just show them explicitly, this is how scientists think about how these ideas connect. That can be a huge difference for students who may not even recognize that those two facts were connected in the first place. Okay. Not only are the connections useful for developing expertise, connected information is easier to remember. So think about memorizing phone numbers. What do you do to memorize phone numbers? Yeah, chunk it. Or what do you do to memorize someone's name? I have 200 students in the section of biochemistry. What do you do to memorize students' names? Rhyme them, yeah, do some kind of association, exactly. Maybe, that their name was Penelope and they were wearing purple for in class. Something. So connected ideas help you remember. So we can go beyond the 5-minute universe here. Okay, so how do you do this? How do you aim beyond the facts? Well, one thing you can do is use Bloom's taxonomy. How many people have heard of Bloom's taxonomy? Awesome. Okay, so you already know. We can go beyond recall, we can go beyond comprehension to analysis, application, synthesis, evaluation. And in particular, in biology, there's a version called Biology in Bloom that was developed by Alison Crowe, Larissa Dirks, and Mary Pat Wendroth, I think. I think those are the 3 authors. So if you want to put Bloom's taxonomy in the context of biology, that's a useful tool. There's I think launched within like the next 2 weeks, a journal of biology education resources called CourseSource. And it will actually be a place to get instructional materials that are aligned to objectives, that are basically designed with backwards design and aiming beyond the facts in mind. So keep an eye out for that truly within the next 2 weeks. And also, I'm going to bring up the idea of messy problems here. Messy problems. Okay, so when you introduce students to messy problems, you have them work with messy problems, they move beyond the facts. And let's elaborate on that next in the next slide. Okay. So, messy problems, ones where there isn't a simple response or a simple answer. What's the value? Well, they're more like the problems we want students to be able to solve. I mean, think about your work as scientists. Can you address most of the problems that you face in your day-to-day life with a simple, like a multiple choice response? No, or a single word answer, or true, false. True, false. Let's be done with that. Fill in the blank. So if we want students to be able to solve messy problems in their lives, in their careers, in their work, we need to get them practice solving messy problems now. Plus, messy problems are way more interesting because they're more meaningful. They're more like what we have to do. They're more real. They're more real feeling. And so the more real the learning task, the more motivated students are to actually pursue it. Okay, so how do you identify messy problems? So there's lots of forms of messy problems. Case studies. How many people have heard of case studies? Okay, good, great. Problem-based learning. I'm just listing up resources here, and I will make my slides available in case people want to navigate to those sites. Process-oriented guided inquiry learning. Have people heard of POGLE? Okay, a number of people have heard of POGLE. Great. Course-based undergraduate research experiences. We just had a session on cures. So this is where you integrate a research project into the context of a class. Plenty of messiness there. And also project-based applied learning, which is very similar to problem-based and case-based learning, but yet another resource for finding those projects that are messy for students to work on. Okay, so some tips about this. Again, those resources are up there so you can copy. You certainly can write your own. There's a lot of good stuff out there that you can adapt to meet the needs and interests of your students and your curriculum. Again, try with one goal, objective, or lesson in mind. I'd like you to consider what I call the bike riding analogy, okay? So messy problems are hard, just like riding a bike is hard. And when we're teaching kids to ride bikes, where do we start? Training wheels? Okay, training wheels. You give them a 10-speed? No, yeah, so like single speed, what kind of brakes? You give them hand brakes? Yeah, it looks like easy, one movement. Forward, backward with the feet. And training wheels, right? And once they've got that down, what do you do? Okay, training wheels off. Okay, carefully, do it on grass. In a safe environment. Okay? So training wheels off, safe environment, then what?
Give a push.
Then you go to the gears, then you go to the hand brakes, then you go to additional, like moving multiple body parts at the same time, additional complexity. So this is basically a form of scaffolding. Giving students or kids support when they're first learning to do something, and then taking the supports away once they have some success. And not only taking the supports away, like taking the training wheels away, but adding complexity. As they develop expertise, you can add things like additional gears or hand brakes or other tools that I don't know enough about because I'm not a bicyclist. But consider where your students are in learning to ride the bike. Do they need training wheels? What might those training wheels be? Do they need less complexity? How can you simplify a problem until they're ready to do something more complex? I recommend doing something like swapping assessments with a colleague, giving each other feedback on whether you're aiming high. I know a lot of folks like loom each other's exams. How many people have actually used Bloom's taxonomy on another person's exam or on your own? Has anyone done that? Okay. So how many people have done it on your own? How many people have done it on another colleagues? Is there a difference? Is it exactly the same?
Are there loops on one or two exams the same?
No. Like the experience of using Bloom's taxonomy to characterize your exam versus a colleague's exam. Why?
You have an idea of what you're looking at result-wise. Their rubrics may not be arranged such a way that they're as easy to tell.
Sorry, which is more difficult?
Analyzing someone else's.
Analyzing someone else's exams is more difficult. And you said why? What did you say?
Oftentimes, rubrics they've made for themselves to use, it's a little harder for someone looking at them for the first time to see honestly kind of what they mean.
Yeah, so you may not be able to look at someone else's exam and know. Is that what you were getting at? What else? What else might be hard about? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know whether they're asking questions about information that students have seen in class, as opposed to a novel.
Right, so something that maybe look remarkably challenging on the surface, maybe something that was taught directly in class. And so it then becomes no longer a higher order cognitive skill to be successful on that assessment. Instead, it's just recalling what happened in class. So I find it actually really difficult to do this unless you can go watch what's going on in class or talk with the instructor about, all right, did they do this? Did they do this? Is this challenging? Have they had experience with this? But that's why it's really nice if you have a colleague, which I believe several of you or all of you are here in teams, right? So you can make plans right now. As each of the class swap assessments. See, right now, that's what I'm talking about. Right now, there you go. Pick a messy problem that's of interest to you, okay? If you're excited about it, students will be more excited about it. You will persevere, and then they will persevere. If you pick a messy problem that you think is actually kind of tedious, and you're like, oh, what are the students going to hear? Yeah, I don't want to do this if it's not worth doing. And it takes persistence. It takes some grit. We talked about grit in our last session. So pick something that you're willing to persevere with so that you can model that perseverance. Okay. Expect students to talk and write. Lots of reasons to do this. First, it gives a student an opportunity to know what they don't know. Okay? And then do something about it. This is called metacognition. Recognize what you don't know. Like, I mean, when do you realize? I mean, think about the first time you taught something. What happened? Oh man, I'm not sure I knew that. Now I have to actually really understand it because I have to be able to explain it to someone else. So this gives students the opportunity to recognize what they don't know and do something about it. It's an opportunity for students to get feedback. You cannot give students feedback unless they give you something to give feedback about. And this is the same for their peers. If they have to explain an idea to their peers, then their peers have an opportunity to give feedback. You need to have that out in the social domain, not just in their head. It increases accountability and engagement, so they're not just sitting listening. And instructors can know what students know and can do, and then tailor their instruction accordingly. Okay? If you get your students to talk and write, then you can say, oh wow, they're really talking about something that I wasn't anticipating. And I'm not just talking about like the football game this weekend. I'm talking about science that you didn't think they would make connections with in their heads, and they did. Or conceptions that they had that you didn't anticipate. Okay, so how can you do this? Lots of ways. One strategy is called writing to learn. So prompts where students actually have to write their ideas. Just questioning or talking, just asking a question. Or giving a prompt for discussion. Clicker questions. How many people use clickers at all? So those can, again, be a way for you to assess, do the students, they basically have to articulate their thinking by selecting an answer. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of verbiage. I mean, I teach intro bio classes of over 300 students. So listening to that much talking or hearing that or reading that much writing is too much. But maybe a clicker question is a way for me to get them to articulate their knowledge and talk about what they know. And I'll talk a little bit more about other assessment strategies later. Okay, so some tips about this. You need to incentivize. Okay, one of the common mistakes I see instructors make is that they make talking high stakes, or they make writing sort of where students are first learning to explain their ideas worth a lot of points. And guess what happens? If you make talking worth a lot of points, what happens? You have to get a lot of talking for what? Yeah, just for the grade. Just talking for the grade. Or if you give a lot of points for just the correct talk, what happens? No. Oh my God, I don't want to speak. Because I'm nervous about getting it wrong. Or if I'm writing an idea, I brainstorm ideas in class, and I'm grading for accuracy rather than just trying to get my ideas out there so that someone can give me feedback, again, that can be a real discouragement. So don't make these kinds of things mistakes. Use wait time. Believe it or not, I know it's really, really uncomfortable. If you ask a question, if you don't talk, they will speak. It happens. You've never had it not work. It may be uncomfortable, but I can out-uncomfortable them. So say you worry, they didn't get the question. Guess what happens if they didn't get the question? They'll ask. Wait a minute, I didn't get the question, or I wasn't paying attention, or I zoned out for 5 minutes. Can you ask that again? So don't worry about jumping in to fix it, or to provide more scaffolding. They'll ask for it. Build in time for feedback. Okay, so this takes time to give students time to write and talk, and that's okay. If you end up needing to spend some time to discuss ideas so they get some clarity, it's worth it in the long run. You can get them beyond that 5-minute university experience. Allow students to make mistakes and to correct them. So clicker questions. Sometimes you can ask a question and they get the idea wrong, have some discussion, and have a chance to change it. Change their thinking. The point is to get them to a more accurate way of thinking, not to penalize for taking a risk. And finally, make it something worth talking about. Okay? If it's something that's pretty straightforward, that they just got from the reading, and you ask a question about it, and then say discuss with your peers, you're like, well, let's sort of discuss. It's right there, black and white. So make it something worth talking or writing about. Okay, so group and collaborative work. Why bother? Well, first, students can accomplish more in a group than they can accomplish alone. So you can give them more complex tasks when they're working in a group than you give them alone. It's a lower risk environment. So they can get feedback from peers and share ideas in a way with each other and make them better before you get involved. And you are high risk, I'm afraid. It increases opportunities for feedback. I think this is one of the most important things for me, is that, if I have 350 students in a class, I cannot give them individual feedback. But they can vet their ideas with each other and get feedback, and usually come to the right way of thinking, even if they didn't start that way, even if there's not like an informed student in the group. By vetting their ideas and moving forward in their thinking as a group, they can get to more accurate ways of thinking without me. Group and collaborative work demands that students articulate their knowledge. So if you put them in a group, they have to talk. So you sort of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. It also increases accountability. So if they have to work with a group, the group is going to say, hey, where are you? And with a class of 350, I can't keep track of every single student. But the peers can help keep track. And then they can also build social support. So one of the main reasons, I shouldn't say one of the main reasons, one of the big reasons that people leave science is because they don't feel part of the scientific culture. They don't know to speak. They don't know how to walk and talk like a scientist. But if you can give them a network that will help them make progress and join the scientific community, basically friends they can talk to say, who's the good professor? How do I do this assignment? I really don't even know where to start. Where can I find that resource? They've got that built into a group in a way that in a large class without group work, they may just fall through the cracks. And then finally, less grading. Woohoo! So if I have 350 students and I put them in groups of 5, I have way fewer products to grade than if I grade them each individually. So they can make them more interesting assignments. I can actually have them write something and grade 70 instead of having them write something and grade 350. So that's always good. Okay, so how do you do this? There's lots of strategies for group work. Peer-led team learning is one strategy. Calibrated peer review. If you are wanting students to do lots of drafts of something, this is a very handy tool for teaching people how to do review of writing, even when they're relative novices. Group exams. How many people have done group exams? This is awesome. I don't want to linger a lot on another video, but I just have to show you. This was revolutionary for me. Oh no. This happened to me earlier. I'm afraid it froze. Okay. Come back. Isn't that awesome? Just kidding. Okay. Behave. Oh.
It's okay, we're all right.
There you go. I'm not actually terribly concerned. I would just like it to actually. Here we go. Yay. Okay.
Say, we've all been there in the classroom.
Exactly. Thank you. All right. So this exam looks like, right? Pages. Staring at stuff. Sleeping. You know, I wonder what he's up to. I'm cheating. Okay. So this is what happens during grouping. And what's so awesome about that, so I'll explain how I do this. Give them the individual exam, so I make the exam short enough that they can complete it in half the class period, okay? And then I give them the same, basically a version of the same exam as groups. So they have to take it individually, and it's worth maybe 50 points. And then I give them the same exam, so collect all the individual exams, and then give them the same exam, and it's worth 25 points, but they take it as a group. Okay? And guess what happens? First of all, their scores always go up. Almost always. There's an occasional very confident but under-knowledgeable student. That's quickly corrected by the second attempt. Students learn to stand up for their own ideas. And they'll even do better, again, than if you added all the individual exams together. So by debating, they clarify things that they can then get correct on the group exam. And they're talking about science. This is especially powerful, I think, in a non-majors class, where no one's debating scientific ideas unless you put some reason for them to debate scientific ideas. This is a great way to get them to debate. Yes?
I like your idea. Hire do you design the groups or maybe you know?
Oh, that's a good question. That's actually a good question.
In my class, I know you're gonna have it over there until there's one or two people that know.
Okay, actually, so a couple things. First of all, my screen is frozen again. So if I could go forward in my screen, there we go, let's try again. You would see that I actually talk about that in my tips. Okay. Let's put all the tips up here. Consider how to organize groups. So, there's no single surefire way. What are some ways that people have used to organize groups? Okay, random assignment. Alphabetical. Self-organized. By grade in what way? Okay, like A, what do you mean by grade? You mean like junior, senior? Or do you mean like A, B, C? Grade in the course. Oh, interesting. So you actually group like with like, as opposed to cross group. Okay. So I do know some people who group like A, B, and C students together so that the C students can learn from the B and A students. Yes, Ellen.
On the first day before class starts for my first year students, I asked them what's the most recent biology course they've had, have they had statistics, whatever, and then I randomized and tried to identify some expertise, pair that up with students that haven't had biology since the 9th grade.
So that's one way to do it. I think you have to think about a lot of things. First of all, are you willing to put in the effort? So in my classes of 40, I organize groups. In my classes of 350, I let them self-organize. But I give them a chance to change or to work independently. So addressing interpersonal issues. So sometimes they are like sitting with their fraternity or sorority folks and they realize, was not a good choice. Can I change groups? And the problem is, if they've had a bunch of group assignments, do they get credit for those group assignments or not? How do you deal with that? And so you have to be able to think through all the contingencies and then set up a plan, figure out what works given your situation. In my situation, we've offered an escape clause, but they basically either have to get the permission of another group to join, and they earn that group's grades going forward, but they keep their grades from the past, or they can work independently and do all the work themselves. So that means more work for them, right? Because we're setting up assignments that are more complex and a lot more work than one person normally does, but that's their choice. So I think that you can there's lots of different ways you can organize groups depending on how much time you want to put into it and really what you're trying to achieve. There's no one single way, but hopefully you have a couple ideas about how you might do it. It's definitely something you have to consider. Back to some other tips. You have to incentivize. Again, we're talking about incentivizing. So it has to, the incentive has to fit the workload. Okay? As I mentioned, the individual tests count more and the group tests count less, but they still count. Again, don't grade on a curve because then you're sort of getting hyper-competitive group behavior. Build in group and individual accountability. So if there's only group accountability, what happens? You get the slacker phenotype. And you can actually address that, again, head on by asking, what's your best group behavior? Well, I stand up for myself, or I'm friendly. And what's your worst group behavior? Yeah, I'm a slacker, I procrastinate. There's ways that you can get students to recognize what their behaviors are, and by articulating that, you can get them their group members to say, hey, wait a minute, you're doing that procrastination thing. Let's stop that. Also, make it challenging enough to require the group. If it's, again, too simple a task, then the group doesn't make sense. Okay, practice. Practice, 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 practice. Give students opportunities to practice. Why? The harder the task, the more we need to practice to learn how to be successful. The more we practice, the more likely we'll be remembering. How do you practice? Well, backwards design builds in practice between formative and summative assessments. And basically using formative assessments in general, and I'll mention this again later. Formative assessments, is that familiar for people? Basically, you give them a task that is like the assessment you will ultimately ask them to do, so you can figure out what they need to learn and what you need to be able to do as a teacher. Okay. How do you incentivize? You incentivize both the practice and the final product. Okay, so the practice is actually a value. You say, I want you to practice, so I'm going to give you a reward for practicing. And again, don't grade on a curve for high stakes for the practice part. Just like you wouldn't expect, a kid to ride in some, century ride on their training wheel bike. Make sure that the stakes are appropriate. And to just give you a sense of how I do this, in my biochemistry class, which is about 200 students, we have reading quizzes, which are graded factually. 15 of 17 count, and the total amount is about 8% of the grade. We have cases and problem sets. Those count for more because they require more thinking and more work. Again, 13 out of 14 count, so that gives them a buy. I ask in-class questions. These are graded for participation, not accuracy. And only basically they have to respond to 90% to earn full credit. They have to participate in breakout sessions, some minimum number, and then exams, and we drop the lowest score. So we've provided incentives for all the different ways that we expect students to practice and made them appropriate for what the task was asking. With practice, you want to make the practice sufficiently challenging, interesting, and important. Like, there's no point in practicing something that you already know how to do, okay? So let me give you an example from my biochemistry class. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to read this, but this is a case that they have to analyze. They have to figure out what's going on. And it's pretty complex, okay? So if we go back to our bike riding analogy, they need some help. They need some training wheels. So instead of just saying, why is this patient experiencing these symptoms? I ask them a series of questions that they have to answer before they get to addressing that issue. And if they can answer these questions, they should be able to be successful on this last one. Okay, so I've given them practice getting all the way to this thing, so that next time I might be able to just go directly to this thing. Okay, feedback and formative assessment. This came up earlier. You won't know what to teach if you don't know what your students do. You don't want to spend time teaching, given limited amount of time in class, doing something that they already know. And students can't improve unless they know what they need to improve on. They need some feedback before they can decide what they need to do differently. Okay? I don't know why that's there, I'm sorry. Okay, some tools for formative assessment. Angelone process, classroom assessment techniques. All manner of different ways that you can go about doing assessment in class, out of class, homeworks, tests. It's a really great resource. And also Kimberly Tanner's Approaches to Biology Teaching and Learning column in CBE Life Sciences Education actually has a number of installments about different kinds of assessment that I've mentioned throughout this talk. And finally, as far as formative assessment, one way to go about this is to think of yourself as more of a mentor than an information deliverer. And that takes me to my last, let me go to that point. So why mentor? And mentor is kind of a funny word. Because you may not think of yourselves as a mentor, and your students may not think of you as a mentor, but I like to think about mentoring as I'm teaching, because mentoring is really defined in terms of three functions. One is instrumental support, or how to. How do I solve this problem? How do I read this paper? How do I analyze these data? And your job is to help them do those how-tos, learn how to. Mentors also provide psychosocial support. You can do this, I know it's hard, but I know you can do it. And believe it or not, you play a role there. If you set up the expectations for students to not be successful, they're going to fall to those expectations. If you say, you know what, I know you can do this, they'll rise to those expectations. And I believe that Sandra McGuire, did she talk today? Oh, yesterday. See, there you go. This is exactly what it's about, psychosocial support, empowerment, okay? And networking support, okay? Being able to connect students with the resources they need to be successful, whether that's finding information online, whether that's finding the right expert to advise them, whether that's finding someone else in the class that can help them, connecting them to the right resources. So these are the things that you can do as an instructor besides deliver information. They can get information through reading, they can get information through podcasts. These are things that they can't get those ways. So if you think of yourself as a mentor, that can make sense. All right, let me go back to this. Tips on this. Again, don't bring in a curver for high stakes. Good in practice. Use group work as a context for feedback and to reduce the grading burden. So that can actually be part of your formative assessment. And encourage iterations. So practice, practice, practice. Use that assessment to inform where you go next. Okay. So have you identified any recurring themes? Any ideas that came up time and time again? Don't be at a curve. Why? It's not a competition. It's not a competition. Don't you want all your students to get A's? Don't you want all your students to do as well as they possibly can? Absolutely. It's not a competition. Okay, what other things came up? Incentivize, incentivize, incentivize. Guess what students think is valuable? What's the sign that something has value? Grades, points, 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 points. So if you want them to care about something besides exams, give points to something besides exams. If you want them to explore and not just get the correct answer, give points for exploration. What else? Practice, 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 practice. Absolutely. So a lot of these ideas are actually interconnected, right? So group work involves talking, involves writing, and involves formative assessment. So a lot of these are intertwined. So that's a lot. That's a lot. Where to start? Well, don't reinvent the wheel. Borrow, copy, use other people's stuff. Adapt it for your context, adapt it for your students, but borrow, 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 borrow. Be transparent with students, okay? And without getting all edgy on them. Don't spend 2 class sessions talking about Bloom's taxonomy and having them bloom themselves or whatever. They're going to say, this is not an education class, this is a science class. But you can be transparent. So here's an example of what I put on my syllabus. And then I really don't mention it again after the first day. But it's very handy to revisit when they do poorly on the exam. So educational research has demonstrated that more opportunities have to verbalize their thinking in writing or aloud, the more you learn. And so I just include this so that I say, this is important. This is important. Have you done this? Okay? And related to this, try one thing at a time, unless you can help yourself, like I said. Sometimes I just have to start a course from scratch that way. But if you can't manage a whole course, which is crazy, you're already teaching a course, pick one thing. And I recommend picking either the thing you're most comfortable changing, so maybe your area of expertise, or the things that students have the most difficulty learning. Okay? And that's because, first of all, maybe they're not learning in any way, and so it's really no risk. And secondly, it's the greatest potential for change. Right? If they're already struggling with this really, really hard, you're not successful in what you're currently doing, change that thing. Just pick that one most difficult thing. Ask a knowledgeable peer for help with feedback. There's lots of expertise in this room. And let me tell you, I don't know, how many people know Peggy Brickman at University of Georgia? Does anyone know her? She's awesome. And she sat down with me. She would sit in my class, and she would watch what I was doing, and she would watch what the students were doing, and instead of saying, well, you know, you got that science wrong, you really should have explained it by referencing this particular paper, she said, you know what I saw the students do? I saw them do this. And I think you wanted them to do this. So what if you did this? And she focused on what the students were doing, where they were struggling, and suggested opportunities to make improvements. So if you can find a critical friend who's willing to do that, it makes a huge difference in how you can improve your teaching. So what I would like you to do is find a nice card on your table, write down one thing you learned, and one action you can take right now. One action you can take right now, and one thing you need more help about, or you still have questions about. We will use this formatively. Everyone have an index card? That next card? Yep. Grab a couple extras. Who else needs an index card? You don't have to write your name, but this allows us to use this formatively. And also provide some accountability. You've written it down, you have to do it. Done? Excellent. I just want to collect it so that I can know one thing you can do. One thing you learned, one action you can take right now, and what you need more help with. We can use this as we move forward. So I hope that I've given you a 20,000-foot view of what we know, and then how that can be used to change your teaching right now, or improve your students' learning right now. It's really not about changing your teaching, it's really about helping your students learn. And look at this. It's all summarized right there. Thanks for your attention.